All right, I'd like to call the California High-Speed Rail Authority into session. And I believe we have a quorum here. We do. And here's what we're going to do. We are blessed with having two new members appointed by the governor. Mr. Rossi is going to be here in a little while, and so we're going to go ahead and swear Mr. Richard, Mr. Rossi in when Mr. Rossi arrives. But in the meantime, I'd ask the Secretary to call the roll for purposes of a quorum.
Chairman Umberg.
Here.
Ms. Schenk.
Here.
Mr. Richards.
Here.
Mr. Burns.
Here.
Mr. Toledo.
Here.
Mr. Hartnett.
Here.
Mr. Richard.
You're here. All right. Thank you to the board for their timely arrival. Let me first begin with public comment, but by apologizing. In Bakersfield, apparently there were some who wished to make public comment who didn't have an opportunity to do so. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to give them an opportunity here for public comment at the outset of the meeting. And so I have a list of folks from Kings County who were in Bakersfield and didn't have an opportunity to comment. And I'll give each of you 3 minutes, and then after we do the first group from Kings County, then I'm going to limit the public comment to 2 minutes. So, beginning with the folks from Kings County, is Ms. Browning here? Mr. Browning, Mr. Ross Browning. Laura Crawford, Felix Delgadillo, Jose Diaz, Leonard Diaz, Millard Downing, Dina Fukuda, Barry McCutcheon, Angie Machado, Mike Montero, Frank Oliveira. Mr. Oliveira? Mr. Oliveira, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to allow us to speak before you. 16 people from Kings County were not inadvertently missed at the last meeting. 16 people were refused access. Okay, that's very important, and that's a violation of the Bagley-Keenan Act. We came to speak before you because our part of the alignment now has a draft EIR, and we wanted to talk about the things that isn't in the EIR that we suspected would not be in the EIR now that the EIR is out. Those people that you named off have jobs. We were sent back not allowed to speak by you, Mr. Umberg, at the last meeting. Those people were not going to come here today on the thought that they may not be allowed to talk in violation of the Bagley-Keenan Act. You violated our rights. Clear. We understand it. And now those people who should be here speaking, who should have spoke to you last month, are busy reading the EIR and doing their jobs. They have 100 to 150 pages a day to read and do their jobs that they have every day. Some of them are milking cows, some of them are selling cars, some of them are selling real estate, others are welders, some are farmers, some are feeding cows. They don't have the time to come here in front of you and not be allowed to speak. I'm here not to represent the group, so to speak, but to represent me. Because what you did to us was clearly wrong and not what should happen in the United States of America, in California. We would like to give you copies of letters from people who are asking to extend the EIR by 45 days to 90 days. So people who have jobs who can't be here today can have a little bit more time to read the document before you close the official comment period. It is my request that you do that. It's also my request that you negate all the actions that you took on July 14th because you didn't allow us to speak. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know, but it's certainly within the power of the board to extend the EIR by 45 days. There are remediations for the Bagley-Keenan Act. We've come here without an attorney to ask you...
Thank you, Mr. Oliveira. Let me read some others. Mr. Scott.
They're not here.
Ms. Stout, P.J. Stuber, or Helen Sullivan. If anyone wishes to speak in the public comment period, we'll leave the opportunity to submit a card open until 9:30. And if any of those names that I read previously, if they arrive, we'll give them an opportunity to speak. But let's do this. We're very pleased to have two new members of our board joined us here this morning. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to swear both of them in. So if I could ask Mr. Rossi and Mr. Richard to stand and report over here. Gentlemen, if you'd raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Dan Richard,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. While we'll certainly miss Commissioner Pringle and Commissioner Crane, both of them provided very valuable service to the state of California and this authority. As I mentioned, we're thrilled to have Mr. Rossi, Mr. Richard, and both of whom have the confidence of the governor. That's fantastic. And we'll pass these down so you can sign them both to make it doubly official. All right, let's return now to public comment. First, we have Mayor Ledford. These are all 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Umberg and honorary board. We're back. I appreciate having the opportunity to speak again, and I wanted to reiterate to our new members that we in the Antelope Valley want high-speed rail. We in the Antelope Valley believe we have the best airport plan in the state of California. We in the Antelope Valley believe we have the best intermodal system ready to serve high-speed rail in the state of California. The entire 5-county regional planning agency, SCAG, supports the Antelope Valley because we meet our air quality and our congestion management goals. The MTA of Los Angeles County backs the Antelope Valley alignment because all of our intermodal transportation goals in relation to an airport and moving people and goods, 10% of your ridership come from the Antelope Valley. So we are here to be supporters. We are here to promote certainly our region. We want to assist you in any way we can to maybe gain a greater appreciation of what the Antelope Valley means to the statewide system. We believe that our community has done a lot to show that, but we're back to redemonstrate that commitment. We believe our vision is quite extensive, and it shows, I believe, all the elements that we preach in local government: smart growth, transit villages, intermodalism. We have a private sector system that wants to join you in Palmdale. So we believe a lot of the components that we all talk to are actually being demonstrated in our proposal. We look forward to the opportunity to continue to demonstrate our commitment to this system. We believe it is a great opportunity for the state of California. We want to be a part of it, and we want to help you get there. Again, I'm going to close by saying Prop A 1A ballot specifically calls out the Antelope Valley. And in its approval, we believe that our valley played a large role in that. So I just want to tell you that we're here and we support you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next, Mr. Steve Williams, followed by Supervisor Perea.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you very much. I'm Steve Williams, City Manager for the City of Palmdale, and I'll just kind of pick up where the mayor left off. Talking about Proposition 1A, I mean, the language right in the ballot called for the route to come through Palmdale. It's been in the plan. It's been on your plan. It's on your website. If you go to your website, there are actually animations on your website that show a train coming through Palmdale, through the Tehachapi's, going to Bakersfield, and to the south to Union Station. I think it's important to realize that the community, these planning agencies that the mayor mentioned, have been counting on that route coming through Palmdale. Developers, people who are interested in investing in the Antelope Valley, one of the first questions they ask us when they come to meet with us is, you guys are on the high-speed rail stop, right? And of course, very proudly, we indicate that we are. So we are shocked at the action, really, that is being taken in terms of moving forward with this grapevine study. We think it's wrong. You know that we've taken legal action to prevent that from moving forward. And I just want to make sure that you're aware of the resolve that we have to make sure that this route comes through Palmdale. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Next, Supervisor Perea, followed by Ms. Ager. Both of you still maintaining your perfect attendance record.
Thank you, Chairman Umberg, and welcome to the two new members. We're excited to have you on this board. It's a great board with a great leader to make the vision and the reality of high-speed rail real for California. So thank you for serving. I'd like to obviously mention that Governor Brown was in Fresno last week, and every meeting that he had, he heard loud and clear that the Central Valley is in support of high-speed rail, that we see and understand the vision of high-speed rail, and from an economic development perspective, this is probably the biggest thing on the charts today, to bring jobs to our valley that are desperately needed, as well as to build a major transportation system that will give all Californians another choice on how to travel in this great state. So thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you for the release of EIR business plans coming out, and we are ready and stand ready to support you in all of your efforts. And I just leave you with one thought, and I carry this around because some of you are from different parts of the state and don't know all of the ag industries all that we have. Ag is our number one industry. We support it. We always will. But when you put it in context, when you're building an 800-mile system in the Central Valley between Bakersfield and Merced, there are 4.2 million acres of productive ag land. The footprint of high-speed rail is 4,000 acres. So will people be affected? Yes, they will. And we know that in this type of project, we would do everything that we can to mitigate that. But it's important to have that number in context because it's not it's a very small percentage compared to the total number. But again, thank you for your leadership, and we stand ready to support you.
Thank you. Sager, followed by, I believe it's Val Toppenberg.
Good morning, Chairman Umberg. I'm Leanne Eager. I'm with the Fresno EDC and Fresno Works. And I just want to give you a couple of updates on things that are going on in the Central Valley. One, we're very excited about the September 8th Small Business Industry Forum. One of our major goals at Fresno Works and EDC is to get our businesses ready, get our towns ready, get our communities ready for the high-speed rail that's coming through. And the Small Business Industry Forum is one way to do that. And I think right now we have about over 300 businesses that are signed up, which means there's probably about 1,000 people that are ready to go. It's going to be at the Save Mart Center on September 8th, and Fresno State has donated the Save Mart Center in order to make this a bigger event, so we certainly appreciate what they're doing. Fresno State is also co-sponsoring a educational summit with Fresno Works, so they have a 6 weeks educational high-speed rail class that SMITCAP honors students will be attending, and it's all about high-speed rail. And so we have special guests, including Mr. Van Ark coming to speak on high-speed rail, and they'll get a high-speed rail certificate at the end of that class. So we're very excited about that. Also, the EDC is celebrating their 30th anniversary this year, and it's going to be Back to the Future is our theme. And one of the things that we're going to be looking at is what's happened over the last 30 years, but what are the opportunities for the next 30 years. And one of those, obviously, is high-speed rail. You know, and certainly not in my lifetime will there ever be an infrastructure project of this size, this magnitude, that's coming to the Central Valley. So we're very excited about that. We're going to focus on that again, and you'll all be getting an invitation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Val Toppenberg, followed by Wasim Ahmed,
Chairman Unberg, members of the Commission, just to give you a little background, I spent the last 20 years working as the Director of the Redevelopment and Economic Development for the City of West Sacramento across the river. I also worked for the City of Merced in the same position for 5 years before that, and I worked for the City of Sacramento working in, again, redevelopment, economic development. I've seen what the major transportation facilities do to communities, both West Sacramento, City of Sacramento. They divide the communities. Even the elevated highway that runs through the City of Sacramento has created a division between Broadway and the rest of downtown and East Sacramento. Those are very important divisions that have been created by transportation facilities. The A2 alignment that is being, as an alternative, will continue to create and enhance the division within some of these valley communities. And it's very important that you consider that seriously as you approach those decisions as you go forward. The dislocation that would be involved in that of both businesses, residences, even churches that would be affected by that alignment, the A2 alignment, as well as the Avenue 24 alignment would be very serious in the communities. They would displace businesses, they would displace jobs, and they cut off the best opportunity that Chowchilla has for economic development in the future. The A1 route and Avenue 21 would have the least impact of your alternatives in that location. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
I have written comments that...
Thank you. And Mr. Ahmed, before you begin, Mr. Ahmed, come on up to the microphone. A couple announcements. We're going to take public comment on all the issues before the board today at the beginning of the meeting. And so I noticed some people have come in since 9 o'clock. If you wish to comment on any topic before the board today, you should fill out one of these yellow cards before 9:30. Yeah, and for those of you who are like me, can't tell the difference between yellow and green. This is green. Fill out a green one. Yes. Okay. And also, I see, Mr. Ahmed, you have written materials for the board members, and I should add that we read all the materials. So if you wish to either supplement or forego your opportunity at the microphone and provide written comments, we'll read them and save them. So, Mr. Ahmed.
Honorable Chair and a member of the board, I'd like to thank you for giving me opportunity. I've been past member of the City of Chowchilla Planning Commission, past president of the Chowchilla Chamber of Commerce, and serve on a lot of other boards. Today I'm here as a property representative of certain commercial properties within the State Route of 99 corridor that is severely and adversely impacted by the recent change in A2 high-speed rail. The commercial property at issue is situated between southwest corner of Highway 99 and Avenue 24. This letter provides that I have here today is of a great concern regarding a recently proposed alternative A2 on a high-speed rail route. While we support A1 staying south of SR 152, we strongly oppose A2. Also, I have a written letter over here from the Mr. Nick Patel, owner of Holiday Inn, and then he wanted me to read that on his behalf as well. He's also the owner of the Holiday Inn Express in Chowchilla. We strongly object to the A2 route and or Hybrid 24 for the high-speed rail. This will devastate my family business and destroy all the years of work we have put into building a well-regarded local business. As a life resident of this area, I have dedicated my life to this community and cannot stand idle by when outside influence make decisions that will destroy the viability and future of our community. Please take into consideration my concern. I am but one of my businesses in Chowchilla that will devastatingly affected by your decision. Should you choose A2 or Hybrid Avenue 24 on Route 24. We urge you to protect the livelihood and the families of Chowchilla. Please make the correct choice when you make your decision. A1 and Avenue 21 have always been the choice of our city.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Thank you. And I see you're reading. We'll be happy to review the materials that you're going to provide.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Skinner, followed by Diana Lacombe.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name's Tom Skinner from Valley Planning Consultants. I provided the written material for you as well. For more than 25 years, Valley Planning Consultants has provided planning and environmental services to the Central Valley local governments as well as the development community. Part of our success during that period is being able to get projects on the ground and developing a sense of fair play between the public and private sector. We all know that the board is under tremendous time pressure constraint, and decision-making for this first element of the high-speed rail system is going to be very difficult. For the most part, I have to tell you that the private sector is supportive of the high-speed rail through the Central Valley, where there's a balanced and cost-effective approach. There's no doubt that a majority of the private sector wants to assist the board in making an environmentally sound and economically supportable decision. Today, the rural public sector is conflicted and concerned. They're afraid that the struggling rural communities will be sacrificed with the A2 route to save 30 seconds in travel time between Los Angeles and San Francisco, while the short and long-term impacts perceived by these very same governments will go unmitigated. Support for the A2 Avenue 24Y route that some local governments have already provided for you may be reversed when the communities find out that the unmitigated impacts will go forward simply because the EIR says there's no significant impact, despite the legitimate concerns of these communities. We sense there will be heavy criticism from the EIR, particularly in those rural communities who have little to gain by this process and a lot to lose. These challenges will come from the rural folks. Such community.
Thank you, Mr. Skinner.
Yes, sir.
I'd be happy to review your written materials. Ms. Diana Lacombe, followed by Mr. Paul Guerrero.
Good morning, board members. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Diana Lacombe, and I'm President and CEO of the Associated Professionals and Contractors, that's APAC. And we've handed out to you and to the audience an op-ed that was recently published in the San Francisco Chronicle called Unfair Competition. And it's the same tune that we've been singing here for the last year. But basically, our membership is asking that we're demanding transparency and accountability in the high-speed rail authority's distribution of funds. We insist that all potential contracting opportunities be open to all interested through broad public outreach and selection. We'd like to put a stop to the rail authorities funneling contracts to specifically large, some international contractors. And we're also asking the Obama administration to stop these federal funds until there's some correction made to include small businesses, minority businesses, disabled veterans. And lastly, we'd like to request that you extend the deadline on the conflict of interest, possibly another 30 days. I believe we had like 15, 16 days. So please consider that so more folks can get a chance to review it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Paul Guerrero.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman and Board, I've spoken before you several times about environmental justice, and it seems to just flow on the wind. So I want to give you a brief idea of what environmental justice is and what I'm talking about. It's part of Title VI. I don't know if you're familiar with Title VI, but Title VI talks about equal opportunity for minorities and so forth. And this was attached to Title VI by executive order. And it says if you spend any federal dollars on a federally funded project, you must do an environmental justice study. You must determine what the impact of your project will have on people of low income and poor minority people and so forth. And we know you haven't done it because the last time I was here at a meeting, you had the room full of farmers complaining that the first time they found out about your project was when someone down at the county told them there was a train line going through their house. And they were up here protesting. Now, had you done an environmental justice study, they wouldn't have been here. Okay? And so we want to see this project go through. We want to see women and minority participation on the project. We don't want to see it shut down. So I implore you, get some legal help and do an environmental justice study. Cover yourself. Let's keep the project going. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bigelow commenting on item number 4, followed by Troy Hightower.
Chairman Berg and members of the board, I'm Jim Bigelow with the Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber. I'm also a pilot of 38 years, and I've flown multi-engine aircraft. And on the side of the train it says Fly California. You're going to do a business plan update, and I think it's important that you do a connection between the Fly California and our aviation system and how the high-speed rail can help with our current delays, let alone the future. On July the 11th, these are the flight sheets for all the flights at San Francisco National Airport. We had extended fog for 5 days, which limits to one runway. And in storm conditions, the same problems occur. And these are international flights, domestic flights, local flights from the Bay Area and San Francisco and the Central Valley. The idea is you could capitalize on, in your business plan, of explaining how this system is going to help the statewide air transportation system. When I sit in the cockpit and I hear a heavy aircraft call sign come on and another aircraft call sign that doesn't say heavy, that means that if you had two heavy jets, one behind the other, 3 nautical miles. If you have a 747 and a 737 in trail, a minimum of 5 nautical miles. So we have lost airport capacity through technology and trying to meet the air transportation needs. So in Europe and other places, they're using the high-speed rail to replace these short-haul flights, providing a more reasonable and fast way, and it also opens up and helps with the capacity problems at the airport. These delays affect people all across the United States coming into California when you have these delays. That's it. So whatever you can do to beef it up, do so, and I'm going to leave these delays for your info.
Thank you, Mr. Bigelow. Mr. Hightower, followed by Mr. Kopscheuer.
Good morning, Chairman Berg and members of the board. My name is Troy Hightower, and I'm here from Kern Council of Governments. And on behalf of the Kern Fast Track Committee, whose members include county supervisors, city managers and mayors, councilmen, public and private agencies, the ag community, labor, and education, we'd like to thank you for coming to Bakersfield last month and holding your board meeting there. In addition, we'd like to thank those board members and authority staff that went on the tour of the alignment options in Kern County. And furthermore, Mr. Chairman and CEO Van Ark, we'd like to commend your staff for helping us coordinate and assist in those meetings and the tour. So with that, we'd like to say that we'd be happy to participate in any future meetings, workshops, or other outreach. Second, we'd like you to accept and consider funding the Bakersfield Station Area Plan. The application was recently submitted by the City of Bakersfield. Kern COG has entered an MOU with Bakersfield and has agreed to provide the matching funds. And finally, we are reviewing the recently released EIR, and we will make written comments, but an initial concern and question has come up regarding the heavy maintenance facilities, because there's sites being proposed in the Merced-Fresno document and the Bakersfield-Fresno document, and the comparisons of the qualifications and impacts are consistent within each document, but not between the document. So that is a concern and a question of how that may be addressed. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Kopscheuer.
Chairman Umberg, members of the board, good morning. My name is Jim Kopschever, council member from the city of Chowchilla. In light of the recent changes in the board membership, I felt it was important to address the board and restate the position of the city of Chowchilla. In April of 2010, the city adopted a position by resolution. Although the county of Madera has changed its position 3 times, the city of Chowchilla has never changed its resolution. The city supports the A1 East, the city supports the Avenue 21 East-West and A1 North-South alignments. We have studied the A2 alternative, and the Avenue 24 alignments in great detail. We find that these alignments cause unrecoverable damage to our city. We do, however, continue to discuss options with your staff. I have copies of this resolution for the board members I'd like to pass. Thank you.
Thank you. Then finally, Mr. Ben Luban. And if there are any of the individuals that I read at the outset of the meeting, let me just read that list again, who are here and wish to comment. Now's their time and opportunity. We're going to close public comment here in just a moment. Phyllis Browning, Ross Browning, Laura Crawford, Felix Delgadillo, Joe Diaz, Leonard Diaz, Millard Downing, Dina Fukuda, Barry McCutcheon, Angie Machado, Mike Montero, Alan Scott, Karen Stout, P.J. Stuber, or Helen Sullivan. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Umberg, and thank you for your tour of duty and your commitment to this country. And Congresswoman, thank you for your commitment to immigration and border policy. I've been wearing those arrows in my back since 1983. I work energy policy now at the federal level, and we're finding a transit obstruction. We're seeing your stimulus funds being threatened. And so I went to Fiona Ma, Assemblywoman, and I asked her, where are we? We're only going to break ground. And I know Fiona back from the days when I did community outreach and turned NIMBYs into YIMBYs in San Francisco. And I see you have a new request for a proposal. Now, I'm Jude Benedict Associates, Ben Luban, one guy. But somewhere I'm a point man, and I like to join this team. And I'm going to have my ear to the pulse where that goes. You've done a lot of hard work. We can't let the House Republicans take our money away and threaten the biggest infrastructure project that this nation deserves. So thanks for all your hard work. I look forward to contacting you. Assemblywoman gave me many contacts, so here I am. I'm the big guy, dancing bear, hopefully to change those NIMBYs into YIMBYs. Continue the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That concludes public comment. Moving on to item number 2, approval of the meeting minutes. Are there any additions, deletions, corrections to the minutes? Those of you who weren't present for the Bakersfield meeting, you can't vote, but, right. Ms. Schenk moves. Mr. Toledo seconds. If there are no objections, hearing none, minutes are approved. All right. Item number 3, the right-of-way services consultants contractors RFP. Mr. Van Ark, is Ms. Jones going to present, or are you going to present on that?
Ms. Jones is going to present.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Chairman Umberg and board members. I'm Patricia Jones, Director of Real Property for the Authority, here to present agenda item number 3, the terms and conditions associated with performance for the right-of-way request for proposal, or often known as an RFP. And would you like me to do that, Tim, or do you want to? Or okay, and this is. Do I point it there or at the screen? Oh, there's. Thank you. Sorry for the delay. At the July 14th board meeting, the board authorized the authority's CEO to issue one or more RFPs and conclude contracts for right-of-way services in an amount not to exceed $40 million. The board also requested staff return to a future board meeting to present the methods that will be utilized to ensure contractor performance and accountability, as well as the contract language associated with these methods. The scope of work will identify specific tasks and deliverables required to deliver a right-of-way for construction. Each will have due dates based on project schedule milestones. The performance and accountability methods included in the scope of work and/or in the contract as appropriate to ensure timely delivery will include but not necessarily be limited to the following: implementation of proven QA/QC internal processes by contractors. The intent is to confirm during the selection process that the contractor has established QA/QC processes in place with a successful track record. Qualified authority staff will perform intermittent management reviews to ensure compliance, as well as providing day-to-day direction and guidance. Weekly progress reports from the contractors, including earned value reporting. These will be reviewed and tracked. Biweekly management meetings with the right-of-way delivery team. And these will include 30, 60, 90-day forecasting and planning, as well as problem solving. And finally, retention of 10% on each invoice pending work task order milestone delivery. With the next slide, I will address retention in greater detail. The contract language will state that the authorities shall retain 10% from each invoice. The retained amount shall be held and released only upon approval that work has been satisfactorily completed and the task deliverables have been received and approved. As an example, a major task deliverable is the right-of-way certification. It is a written statement that summarizes all the related right-of-way matters pertaining to construction clearance. It certifies that the required real property interests have been secured in accordance with all applicable laws and procedures, and the physical obstructions such as buildings and utilities have been cleared or will be by a specified date. The 10% retention tied to this deliverable will be retained with the right-of-way certification until the right-of-way certification is received and approved. The contract language will also include termination clauses. The 5-day termination could be considered the final non-performance control. It may be used with cause and following an established process procedure. It is, of course, not a desirable outcome, but it is a useful management tool when required. A 30-day contract termination may be utilized without cause and for many reasons, which may not necessarily be related to a performance issue. The authority plans to award more than one contract for right-of-way services, so we will have the ability to adjust workload if needed so as not to jeopardize the project schedule in the event the termination clauses are utilized. And finally, the recommendation to the board is to approve the methods of ensuring contractors' performance and accountability substantially as presented today, and authorize the CEO to issue one or more RFPs and conclude contracts for right-of-way services in an amount not to exceed $40 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Just to be clear, this is our last opportunity to weigh in as a board prior to the RFP being issued, right?
That's correct,
All
yes.
right. And also with respect to our goals concerning small businesses, minority-owned businesses, and disabled veterans-owned businesses, we're also going to achieve those goals, or at least seek to achieve those goals?
The goal is 25% small business and 3% DBBE.
All right. Okay. Other questions by board members?
Yes.
Let me start over here. Mr. Toledo?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I have three questions. With respect to the review that's going to happen weekly and biweekly and so on, is there a means by which that information can be made, I don't know if public is appropriate, but where we could have a dashboard where we can see that these contracts not only have been awarded, but the progress report of those are being reported to the board and potentially to the general public as well? It would really hold these contractors accountable if on a week-to-week basis, it doesn't have to be very sophisticated, but a means by which boxes can be checked and everybody knows that these people are doing the work that they've contracted to do.
I don't see that there would be a problem, but Mr. Van Ark, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Toledo, I would recommend we could do something like that. That's not a problem. I think what you'll see as well as we move forward now, we have our operations committee, and the operations committee clearly is going to play a bigger role as we move forward towards the operations issues on this project, which means that when we have those meetings also on a monthly basis, which we're not having at the moment on a monthly basis, but as we move into the kind of construction operations direction, and we can make that a topic of those meetings as well, which is a good public forum to put them on and report back, on this particular activity as well in those meetings.
Well, I would request that we have a formal briefing at each one of our meetings, and that operations committee does review this every time that they meet, and we are informed of any contracts that are on what I'll call watch list, and those that are performing, and of course those that for some reason or another are not performing. I also had a question, Mr. Chairman, regarding the 10% holdback. How was that number arrived at? Obviously, as a business person, my inclination would to have that be richer, magnitude of 20%, so that, again, there's really an incentive to perform and to deliver the value on a timely basis.
Mr. Toledo, there were two sources for this 10%, and yes, we did discuss a higher figure as well. We tried two directions. One is going through the state contracting rules and laws. 10% is a typical holdback through the DGS organization who we contract with and through. Secondly, we went through the association, and you can help me out with the name of the association, but the association for this particular work. They have reconfirmed that the 10% is a relatively good standard within a norm within the industry. And, we also have to be careful that we want to live within the norm of the industry, within our own rules and regulations of the state, and, of course, not scare away suppliers as well. So there were two checks done, two directions that we found the same 10% as the figure.
Very good. Thank you very much. I don't have any further questions at this time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Schenk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to drill down a little bit more on the small business and minority women and disabled sector. We talked about this in the last executive committee meeting, talked about it with respect actually to the right-of-way contracts. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about what kinds of meetings you might have had, it's nowhere in here, and I want us to put this in our DNA as our priority. I thought we came to that conclusion at our executive committee meeting, and if you'll allow me the liberty of jumping off to sort of expand on that, not so much in your area, Ms. Jones, but Mr. Van Ark, we talked about collaboration, we talked about environmental justice studies. If you wouldn't mind using this opportunity to inform us on where we stand with that.
So firstly, if we could talk about the small business participation in this particular RFPs, we believe there are a lot of small businesses that are involved in this particular type of activity. I'd also like to remind you of the RFEI conference that we had in Southern California, and also, and I would have brought it up and will bring it up in my CEO report, the Fresno event, you've already heard about it. There's another outreach event in Fresno in the beginning of September, and the whole intent of those is to bring these, to have an opportunity to speak to small businesses. So that is a clear outreach to small business. A lot of the people in LA were involved in right-of-way acquisition as well. A lot of those type of contractors were there. They will be there again, I'm sure, in Fresno. So we are reaching out to them. We are talking to them. And we want them to be participating in these. This is a typical contract that small business can play a big role in. With respect to the environmental justice, I just wanted to get Dan Levitt to inform you as to what has been done, as this issue is covered to a great extent in the environmental process.
Yes, thank you. I would just like to assure the board that the draft environmental documents that are out for both Merced, Fresno, and Fresno to Bakersfield do comply with all the CEQA and NEPA requirements to address social and economic issues, including environmental justice. The environmental justice issues Those are covered in the document in Section 3.12, Section 312, under a chapter called Socioeconomics, Communities, and Environmental Justice. In addition to that, a community impact assessment has been made for each section, and those are on our website, and those are also available to the public. So this is our documents have met all the requirements of both CEQA and NEPA for environmental justice issues.
Mr. Chairman, may I? People in small business don't have huge staff, and they don't have the time because they're busy with their, their small business, to go plow through 6,000 pages to find. Is there some way that we can, in a common sense, practical way within the law, pull this out, make sure that the folks who are interested in this area do get it, that they don't have to go through everything else if they're not interested in everything else, to really reach out in a pragmatic way?
Just so you know, in addition, what we've done, by legal requirements, we are having a series of public hearings towards the end of the public comment period. Mm-hmm. But in addition, what we've done, and actually what are going on right now, is a series of public workshops throughout the Central Valley for exactly that purpose. And we're doing those throughout the Central Valley, focused on certain areas that are more EJ-type areas, to get exactly the information out that you're talking about. That was the main purpose of doing those meetings. And so there's a series of meetings that are going on. We've already had several of them. They're getting good participation. I was hearing numbers of 100-plus people at the meetings showing up and getting this type of information. So we've gone above and beyond really trying to get this information out and being able to point to them to the sections that are most appropriate for them to be looking at.
Okay. Well, I commend you for that, but maybe just if it's possible, without burdening our own staff, one extra little step. We have a couple of folks in the audience who've been here before. They take their time to come and present. They've done it at the executive committee. Maybe talking with them too to get some ideas on how to get this out, because we're not the repository of all information.
Absolutely. I'm available after the meeting and be happy to talk with them.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Commissioner Richard.
Yes, thank you. I apologize in advance for one of probably what will be many references to my BART service, but what I wanted to just follow on to the Vice Chair's remarks and say I think this is extremely important in a state like California, that we provide opportunities for everybody to participate. And in addition to her suggestion of reaching out to the people who work this, I think a lot of the public agencies, not just transit, but whether it's BART, MTA, San Francisco, have a lot of experience with this. And we have a very overburdened staff, people who are working very, very hard. And I think if we can try to reach out to some of those other agencies to get a sense of their best practices, the things they've learned, how to use websites and other technologies to do that, we might be able to really expand the penetration to small businesses and do it in a way that is efficient use of our staff time.
Thank you. Other comments? Commissioner Rossi.
I'd just like to ask a question. As you look at these performance and accountability methods that are laid out here, have you looked at other companies to get best practices of what they utilize to review this type of work?
Yes, I did. I reviewed several RFPs from actually from around the country related to right-of-way services. I have also been in touch. Mr. Van Ark was mentioning the association he referenced is the International Right-of-Way Association. I'm a longtime member of the International Right-of-Way Association, a senior member, and I was in touch with the Vice President, Lisa Harrison, who is also the chairperson for the Consultants Board for the International Right-of-Way Association. So I'll be coordinating, working with Lisa to ensure that we're meeting industry standards. And that our RFP will be solid RFP.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would also echo the comments on small business as well.
I'm sorry.
I would also echo the comments on small business as well.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Rossi. Commissioner Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Jones, just two quick questions. With regards to the RFPs, just so I make sure I understand, I think you mentioned the issuance of potentially one or two RFPs. Does that mean I mean, we haven't predetermined who we're issuing RFPs to, have we?
Oh, no.
Okay, so we've just got maybe one or two documents, but they're going to be issued to the business community in general.
Yes.
Okay. The second question is, I think it would be important, I mean, we all recognize this is a critical and a very sensitive part of any development project, and obviously very important. I would be very interested in making sure that your respondents would be able to provide the information to indicate how they intend to supplement their knowledge and understanding of local conditions with regards to both real estate and business and the type of businesses in various portions of California. I think that's going to be real critical in dealing with the local citizenry and maintaining the best public relations that we can on a very difficult part of the development of high-speed rail.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Harden.
Thank you. I know at the end of the report it indicates that the authority plans to award more than one contract. I'd like to emphasize that it's really important, I think, to award more than one contract. It's just my experience in these kinds of things, and this is a much bigger project than is in most people's experience, but in order to have good, timely service, I believe it's really important to have multiple contracts, and it provides the opportunity for smaller companies as well who are in particular sensitive to the areas in which the services are going to be provided to be carefully considered as qualified candidates and perform the kind of service that is sensitive to the local area but is professional as required. I just think that's really important. Also, sometimes find after the request for proposals are issued and reviewing the qualified candidates that there end up being some required contractual provisions that are a real impediment to small businesses being involved. And I think we have to be sensitive to that to see if we're finding something unique to this industry in which we have some requirements that maybe are unnecessary that are really acting as a serious impediment to small businesses and disadvantaged businesses being involved. Obviously still consistent with the quality of professionalism. We can't waive any requirements that are important, but I think we should be sensitive to that and be flexible within reasonable limits if we can.
All righty. Comments or questions? Is there a motion?
Second.
Okay. Mr. Toledo moves. Mr. Richards seconds. Madam Secretary, if you call the roll. The resolution is, just to be clear, it is Resolution HSR 11-21 found in your book. Madam Secretary, or Mr. Secretary, excuse me.
Chairman Umberg.
Aye.
Ms. Schenk.
Aye.
Mr. Richards.
Aye.
Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Mr. Rossi.
Aye.
Mr. Toledo.
Aye.
Mr. Hartnett.
Yes.
Mr. Richard.
Okay, motion carries, resolution carries. Just one caveat. When the RFP goes out, if you could let those potential responders know that board members can't engage with the RFP participants. I didn't realize how popular the chair was until last month, and I've been inundated with different suggestions, proposals, and those kinds of things. And I suppose that we probably become viewed as unresponsive, but and that goes for all RFPs. If the responders could be informed that we can't engage with them once the RFP is out. All right. Thank you. Okay, let's turn to next item, which is an update on the business plan. Mr. Van Aert.
So, Mr. Chairman, members, you know that we have put in place for some time now a working group for the business plan. And Jeff Morales, former executive director of Caltrans, is heading our activities on the business plan. So, and at the same time, you know as well that about a month ago we brought on KPMG, although somewhat late. I think we debated and discussed that very often in the board meeting. KPMG has now been with us for a while, and Mr. Kurt Ramey introduced their organization at the last board meeting. So the two gentlemen that are going to give you an update on some of the aspects of the business plan today are these two gentlemen. So Mr. Jeff Morales and Mr. Kurt Ramey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. What we are going to do is give you a general update on the process of the development of the business plan while the work is still underway, before the results are finalized and ultimately presented in a draft, and then in a final document that goes to the legislature. These are the general topics that will be addressed, topic areas that will be addressed in the business plan. This is a combination of, in some cases, statutory requirements, but also just sound elements that should be in a business plan, addressing the key issues that decision makers need to be aware of and understand in making the decisions about moving forward. At the previous meeting, go back, sorry. Today we're going to focus on a few of the areas, the need for high-speed rail in California, which focuses on the economics of the project, the business model options, and funding and financing plans. Okay. At the previous meeting, back in July, there was discussion of the phasing of the project, which is a key element of the business plan because it really lays out for the first time the implementation strategy of how the program will be moved forward. It ties directly to the economic analysis, ties directly to the funding issues that Kurt will speak to, and those phases are really critical as we go forward. The business plan will follow on this by also laying out some criteria by which future decisions could be made as far as which phases go at which point in time. Next. Okay. An important element of the plan is the economic analysis associated with it. I want to assure you that in this business plan, we are conducting a very thorough economic analysis, one that is tailored to this project. It's not just taking kind of macro assumptions about job creation and other things, but really looking at the specifics of this project in the environment in which it will be undertaken and in the economy of this state of California. We've gone through a very extensive process before, in fact, beginning the economic analysis of reaching out to and meeting with people around the state who were involved in this field, who do economic analysis work at our partner agencies, for local governments, for MPOs and others, and academics, in a series of workshops where the methodology was discussed, presented, vetted with them. And so we feel very comfortable that it was important to, and we got the buy-in of people that what we were looking at and the types of outcomes that they will see are consistent with and supportable by them, and that will really be representative of the types of benefits that will accrue to the state. This is part of a very extensive outreach program that Mr. Van Ark and others have been a key part of as part of developing the business plan, of reaching out to people who will be key audiences for the business plan to make sure that they are engaged in the process early, of making sure that we are identifying the right kinds of issues and incorporating their perspectives. One of the specific elements that you will see in the economic analysis is a benefit-cost ratio. I'm sure all of you are quite familiar with what that is, and it's simply looking at the costs of the project and the benefits against it. Just want to point out that this, again, is very inclusive on the cost side. It is not just the initial capital costs, but the annual operating and maintenance costs, as well as replacement costs on things over the life cycle of the project. So there's an effort to be as comprehensive as possible at looking at the costs and looking at the benefits. The preliminary work suggests this program has a very strong benefit-cost ratio, and really then will lead decision makers to the decision that this is a good investment for the state and will produce real benefits for the state of California. One thing that's worth noting is what we do not include in the benefit cost analysis, although we discuss it in the broader economic analysis, is the cost of not investing, or what it would take to invest in other systems in order to provide the same sorts of benefits. We're not including it in the benefit cost because that's not standard practice to do so. We didn't want to in any way break new ground on the benefit cost. But it is very sizable, as you can imagine, and it will be discussed in the business plan. And it was actually mentioned, some of that was mentioned in one of the public comments, and I'll talk a little bit more about aviation and the role that it plays in a moment. Obviously, a lot of interest in jobs and what jobs will come out of this project, out of the entire program. We'll be reporting on jobs really being created in three broad categories. First, during the construction phase, and those are both direct jobs and indirect jobs. That is, people who are employed directly, laborers, construction workers, others who are employed directly in building the initial segment and the rest of the project as it goes through phase one. And then the indirect jobs, which are those people who have jobs supporting all the people who are being directly employed on the program. Second category will be once the system is up and running, those jobs associated with the project, with the system, the operations and the maintenance of it, everything from ticket takers to engineers, all the people associated with actually running the system. And again, there you see it on two levels, direct employment and indirect employment, because there is a stimulative effect from that direct employment. Finally, there is a broader category of jobs that will be created, which is really the ultimate impact of developing high-speed rail in the state, which is the improvements to the overall state economy that will come from the implementation of the system and the efficiencies that come with it. Those are permanent, long-time jobs, really spread truly statewide, felt across virtually every sector of the economy, and frankly become stronger over time as congestion and other issues become worse in the rest of the transportation system. Next. Just to expand on that a little bit, on that final point, high-speed rail will, and the economic analysis will show that it will help the overall economy become more efficient, connecting the economic centers, and that's what we've seen in other countries where high-speed rail is in place. That's what everything shows in our analysis. Connecting the major economic centers creates efficiencies. Connecting the major transportation hubs creates efficiencies, creates new opportunities. And we expect to see this is a state that is dominated in many ways by economic clusters, high-tech and other biomedical and other clusters. Those will benefit from high-speed rail by the improved access to labor, to markets, et cetera. That will all be detailed in the economic analysis. And again, we'll talk about not just, so we are not looking just at the direct impacts of building the system, but what the broader economic impacts will be over the long run as a result of the system being in place. Finally on this, before I turn to Kurt to talk to some things, we will talk about the price of not investing in high-speed rail. I think the benefit cost ratio will show that the investment makes sense and should go forward. The other side of that is what happens if that investment is not made. The capacity is, the demand is still there. The state continues to grow. That capacity needs to be met in some way, or else we're making a decision to stifle growth in California, stifle competitiveness, stifle economic productivity. We'll detail in the economic analysis what an equivalent investment, what sort of equivalent investment would be needed in other systems, such as expanding highways, expanding airports, in order to meet the same, provide the same sort of capacity that the high-speed rail system will provide. That number is well in excess of $100 billion in investment in other systems. But you also have to look at the other side of that. It's $100 billion, but I don't think anyone sits here today and thinks it's feasible that we're going to add 2,000-3,000 lane miles of freeway in California. So we can generate the number of what it would take. The whole other question is, can we even conceivably, feasibly do that? So it really does strengthen the argument and bolster the case from an economic perspective of why investing in high-speed rail makes sense, and we'll cover that. I'll turn to Kurt now to talk about the financing and funding.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. As Mr. Van Ark mentioned earlier, we've been on board about 60 or 70 days now. We're working hand in hand with the team to develop the funding and finance elements of the business plan. And today we have some preliminary comments on the business model and the funding and finance plan. Importantly, under all business model options, and I think perhaps this is everybody already knows this, government plays the key organizational and leadership role. And as you begin to define a business model, it really is the relationship of all the parties that are required to deliver and operate the program, the entire program. And so there's a significant number of public sector players in that. There are certainly there's the state of California, the federal government, there's regional transportation agencies that we'll work with. There's potentially commuter rail systems, there's cities, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's a significant role for the private sector, and that's what I wanted to discuss today, was sort of how the private sector can be leveraged in terms of helping us with costs, in terms of making things more efficient, and when the potential for actual private finance may begin to be considered. In a big picture sort of framework, there's four key functions, entities, groups of entities that will ultimately be necessary. Clearly, there's the government side on the far left, which is governance, and that includes the federal government and state of California, and that's ownership of assets, that's standards, supervision. When you move to the right in the slide above, you begin to see three main groups of functions. I'll go clear to the right first because that's kind of the quickest and easiest to explain. There's going to be, under our current model, which is a model that is used in many other countries and is sort of presupposed a little bit by statute here in California, there will be a train operating company. And it's important that there be one, right, that up and down, at the end of the day, there is an organization that is operating the system and its passenger service and vehicle maintenance and procurement. In the middle, there's in shorthand, the InfraCo. There is an organization, a company potentially, to manage infrastructure operations and its dispatch, its power, its maintenance. And then moving one further to the left, there are a group of contracts and companies that will actually build this and build portions of it over time. But that's really kind of the four key roles that will be described in the private sector of the business model. Timing and phasing, timing of private participation really mirrors the phasing of the project. And from a business model perspective, it's sort of most simple at this point to see the early and business model and what that will look like, and sort of the business model when the system is in operation, sort of when we're all grown up. The phasing that occurs as we get there will be a set of decisions made by the board over time. Now, let me explain that just a little further. In the ICS, the business model sort of boils down relatively simple. There's an authority, there's some contracts, we're constructing, and we have talked extensively about a design-build sort of relationship to a contractor. At the end state, out there in operations, there's that picture that we showed just previously with a train operating company, an infra operating company. The project's been constructed, and there's some degree of private finance and financial investment in there. As you come from ICS down to where we're in revenue operations, that's when the decisions will be made about when private finance will be able to come to the table, and that will be very closely related to when revenue operations and cash flows are being kicked off from the project. It's just too expensive to borrow money from anybody, private sector or public sector, before you have cash flow going. And it's just like we all, have in our houses. here's a picture of a possible private sector business model at the iOS stage. And there's many versions of what this could be. You see the train operating company over on the far right. That's a pretty standard approach. We think that that's where the whole thing is moving. The infra company, you see, let me back up. The light line around infra company, infra build, and the four boxes on the left show sort of how complex that operations and maintenance set of activities are. And what's important here, and what has been proven in sort of the world of public-private partnership, is that complexity has great opportunity for risk. And if there is anything that can be done to drive down costs, it's to transfer life cycle risks, and that begins to speak to bundling of those activities in that light box. And that's going to be a set of decisions and alternatives that are presented to the board in future years. But those decisions probably have more to do with what the private sector can do for you than whether you can borrow money from the private sector. You can always borrow money. There's no question. When we have revenues, there's public funding, public finance sources, there's private finance sources. The credit analysis of both public and private is relatively understood. It's all based on whether there's cash available. That's an important element. This element, driving down costs, is really sort of the secret sauce, and it was proven most recently over in Portugal, where the costs of that DBFOM were significant, that actually were signed in the concession agreement, were significantly less than what the planning estimates that the program was built around were based on. Let me just branch quickly to funding and finance. It's common to sort of interchange the use of funding and finance, and we do it ourselves. But importantly, going clear to the right of that top bullet, finance, whether it's public or private, is driven by the ability to have cash flows to repay the finance. And that fundamentally is driven by where the funding comes from. And the funding for this project is, there's some government monies available early. We have some bond monies. Certainly the federal government is a funding source. Ridership is a funding source when we begin to collect ticket revenue. But those funding sources are really the key at this point to carefully evaluate and analyze. And then once we sort of get our arms around that, we can decide how things can be financed downstream. The ability to finance really in this project is part and parcel to those revenue generating operations. And that has to do with when we get into that initial operating segment, eventually towards Beta Basin. And so the ability to borrow money is out in time. We'll talk for a moment about funding, financing sources. This initial construction section is funded, right? And now we've got some approvals that we are working very hard to document in the business plan and get approval for. But we know where that money can come from in terms of we've got our federal ARR grants. We have some state Prop 1A matching money. That is a project we need to get it executed. And then we're moving for the next few years. The next real section, right, for funding and financing analysis is the initial operating section. We are not yet in revenue operations at that point as we're building that. The state requirements is for some matching. It's important. So really the punchline is federal support and the ability to put in place a long-term federal program, and I'll speak to this in a little bit more detail in a moment, but that key element is very, very important to this project. Now, very long and ambitious plan, and however, the first step is the one we're really focusing on and working on, and that's the one that the funding plan that will come to you in a month is going to be focused on. The ultimate need in the project is for a relatively is for $3 to $4 billion over 15 plus years. When you really begin to boil down, cash requirements over time from all sources. We have certainly, if all that money is available today, we're going to build in a much more rapid way than if that money is provided to us over time. But the net amount is in that range. The sources, and I'd like to take them kind of in a little bit out of order. The state, we know, we have the $9 billion in total capacity and the $2.8 billion that has been allocated to the ICS, and there's some other smaller opportunities that we're evaluating in terms of state funding opportunities like greenhouse gas opportunities. Let's branch down to private. That fundamentally is the ability to leverage the capital markets based on the revenues of the project, whether we do that from a revenue perspective or whether we do that on a public perspective or a private perspective. If you do it on a private perspective, it'll be a debt and equity sort of situation. If you do it on a public, like a RIF loan or something, it'll be primarily debt. But it's revenue-backed financing that sets down in the private sector, and we're doing the evaluation of that right now. We'll have an idea of when that value can be released within the cash flows, and it's out there towards when we have revenue-generating ridership. So that's there is more analysis that needs to be done on local participation, and we see that being done after the next after this business plan is put out, because it's very detailed in terms of which specific elements of the project and how local governments can participate in the various portions. There'll be some discussion in the business plan, but the specifics will be really tied to the individual phases as those phase decisions are made. And that really takes us to the federal government. There's an existing appropriation and grant programs, but that's just not enough. It's our view that sort of working that process, sort of on a one-off basis for a program of this size over time will be very extensive and will not provide the level of sort of future guarantee that will help you with the private sector participation. And so what we're urging is, and I think that this is supported by the administration, federal administration, is new programs, a new program to support high speed in this country. There is a couple of large program opportunities. One is in reauthorization. That's had a lot of discussion. There is another related to tax credit bonds, the Build America approach, which basically allows you to leverage borrowed monies by having the federal government provide a tax exemption for interest. And so there's a couple of things in play, and we are discussing a couple of those programs with FRA. But fundamentally, a new program, a long-term program, something that begins to provide us some understanding of stability from the federal government over time, which is important. And then finally, the Prop 1A requires a funding plan. And the funding plan is to support the appropriation of bond proceeds. The funding plan will be a separate document that comes to you next month. It will be a subset of the business plan, but it will focus on the ask, which is the match of state bond money. and it will describe the usable segments that the ICS fits within. The ICS is the money we're asking for. The usable segments are the IOSs. Either IOS meets that criteria, and we want to be sure that we allow the board the flexibility to determine the IOS, which is a decision that will be made in the future. But this report will be provided, and you'll see this. It has been, it's designed to meet statutory requirements, and importantly, it's also going to be designed to maintain flexibility. And with that, that's the end of my prepared comments. Just quickly on next steps, there is a continued stakeholder dialogue regarding the business plan. There is extensive outreach. We've been up and down the state. We're in Washington next week. So there's a fair amount of stakeholder dialogue going on right now. There's funding plan coming to the board on the 3rd, and then there's a process for moving the funding plan forward to the legislature and peer review.
Yeah, so that's just giving you a quick sense of the balance of the schedule to bring the business and funding plans before you, ultimately to get them to the legislature as required and as necessary. So we will be back next month with more information. And with that, if you have any questions, we're certainly happy to take them.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen. Before I turn it over to the board, this is obviously a very, very important product and process for us. And I know individual board members, particularly new individual board members with expertise in the area, will provide additional input and insight. One of the things that I know you'll be doing is meeting individually with board members so that you can get into greater detail here in the next several weeks. So we're grateful for that. Having said that, if there are any questions or comments at this point, we can entertain them. All right. Is it? Yes.
Yes, thank you. And I apologize if this has already been provided and I've missed it, but on page 4 of the slideshow, there's a reference to the workshops that have taken place around the Bay Area, the Central Valley, to talk about the economic impact methodologies and receive feedback. I think it would be helpful to have a list at some point of the workshops. I don't think it needs to be part of the business plan necessarily, but maybe an appendix, because I think in terms of the reliability, I think we're relying on the business plan as it relates to the economic impact and other aspects of it to have a very sound, tested, vetted methodologies, and I think it's important for the public that it be very clear and transparent as to how these things were arrived at and how things were vetted. And at least as to this particular reference, it would be helpful to me to have a list of the workshops. Additionally, page 8, the 8th slide, makes reference to the price of not investing in high-speed rail. I think that's a really important aspect of the discussion related to the plan. And I also think it's very important that when talking about the figures, that is the price, that we're really careful in deriving those figures so that they are solid figures. Obviously, there's some crystal ball work being done on that. There's no way, as we know, without certain levels of engineering design to have any real solid estimates on a variety of things. But I think it's really important when we bandy around figures of $100 billion or more that we're real clear on how those figures were derived. And I know it comes with the caveat that it's, we're not assuming that all of this is feasible. That is, the alternatives for which the money would be spent to keep the system intact with new runways and thousands of lanes of highways or miles of highways and so forth. But I think it's important to have some detail with respect to that so that people can have a sense of making their own judgments about whether or not some of that is feasible. I think it'll be pretty obvious in large part that much of that isn't feasible. And so then we have to, draw the conclusions from that. If it's not feasible, even at $100 billion or $150 billion price tag, what happens to our state if we don't do high-speed rail? And I just think that's such an important part of the argument that we really have to have proper attention paid to that. And I know it will be, but I just don't want it to read as if it was just casually done and, gee, we throw out a $100 billion figure and we go on our merry way. So I think that's really important. Also, one of the public members commented on the aviation in particular and the consequences. I know that has to do with, in part, the price of not investing as well and the consequences of not investing. And I understand there's more work being done with the airports and gathering information on that. I think it's really important for that to be very solid in the report as well, so that when people look at this report, they can say, yeah, they've drawn some very fair conclusions from that, and it's on reliable data. It also be, I think, of interest to know if there have been large projects in the past, whether in California or otherwise, that were built over many years that were in large part dependent upon federal funds that weren't secured as of the time the project started. I mean, we're subject to lots of criticism about having a hope and a wish and a dream that federal funds are going to come. And obviously there's no contractual commitment by the federal government to provide the billions of dollars in which that we need. But I've got to believe that there have been projects built over the years in our country that received federal funds over extended periods of time that people weren't guaranteed they were going to get them when they started on their process. And I'd like to see some examples of that. Whether or not they are in the business plan, I think it would be important to know. And if there aren't any examples of that, I think it's important to know that, too, as we make our judgments on the soundness of the financial future.
Mr. Chairman, just firstly, Member Hartnett, thank you for those comments, but I do want to assure you that, it's not just a value of greater than $100 billion that will be in the report. It will be substantiated. But apart from that, you're quite right. We've had approaches from some of the airports in our state that are saying that this business model is part of their business model because, we have to look after the transportation of the people in the state into the future. And the airports, in particular the airports in the highly populated areas, don't have additional capacity. So we will all be grinding to a halt unless we find some solution. They're quite well aware of the limitations that they have of expanding their infrastructure. So very clearly, and that doesn't mean they're not going to be flying. They will be flying. They will be flying long haul flights, which is really what it's all about. You heard one of the public speaking about this today as well. Not only the delay aspects and so on of airports, but also the fact that they can concentrate on that which they want to concentrate on the long haul flights, and use that capacity they've got for long haul. So yes, we're working with those other authorities as well to generate these chapters of the business plan.
Thank you, Mr. Van Ark. I'm sorry.
I can respond additionally if you like.
Please,
Mr.
Morales, go ahead.
On the workshops, and I think it fits into a broader scope of transparency, the workshops and the detail behind that $100 billion figure. The authority has insisted on and is committed to a full transparency in all of the work being done supporting the business plan. So people will be able to see exactly how we arrived at numbers that will be presented. They will see the list of the groups that we met with. And again, the point of that outreach, particularly with regard to the economic, was not just to touch base with them, but to vet our process before we got into it. I think we've all seen in different cases before. If you do that after the fact, you often it's a much trickier prospect. And so in addition to those local government groups, there were state agencies who will be key reviewers of this who were included in that as well. Aviation, just to expand a slight bit, that will be covered absolutely in the plan. One of the things that we will talk about, and again, I'm sure you're well aware of Spain, for example, when high-speed went in between Madrid and Seville and Madrid and Barcelona, there were dramatic fundamental shifts in the mode shares between aviation and high-speed rail. It's not for the sake of competition, it's a more efficient use of resources. And so you're freeing up that airport capacity to do what it can do better. On the question of big expectations of funding, I think probably almost any major program you could point to was at the same state that this program is in its infancy. Here in the state, the freeway system, development of that, there was no assurance that would get funded. The University of California system, the state water system, everything. And if you can go back in the archives, you'll see a lot of commentary very similar to some of the commentary about this program. So we will provide examples of that throughout.
Thank you, Mr. Rouse. Ms. Schenk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, just for those authority members who have not yet had the briefing, I would really urge you to set aside some time. The staff and the consultants do an excellent job and probably get tired of hearing their own voice repeating the same thing, but it was much appreciated, and I appreciated the time. Could really drill down and they answered a lot of hard questions. I guess as the symbolic gray hair of this authority here, having had the history, I'll tell you that this business plan is just about our last chance to rebuild confidence in this project, in us, that we can get this done. The first business plan was done in a very different atmosphere. We had very limited staff, 3 people, most of whom were usually furloughed because of the budget crises. It was an atmosphere of sort of wishes, hopes, and faith. And so that first business plan was more a sales and marketing piece than it was in the nature of a proxy. And we tried but didn't do it. Now is the time. And so I approached this with some amount of trepidation, and I will say that having reviewed the material, having spent time with the staff, I have a growing confidence that this is the document that we need, with all of the warts, with all of the risks, and that we were going to do it right with all the stakeholders. I appreciate that this has been truth tested with some of our more major critics, those not just the sort of the NIMBY, but people who have legitimate concern and questions, and that we're able to address those, or to say that we can't, to be taken on faith. Going back, 30 years, when I was secretary at BT&H, I will tell you that every single project, as already Jeff has mentioned, it's like your mortgage. You don't pay for very few can pay all cash up front. And you have mortgages that are paid out over years, and this is analogous to that, as has been every project. And Commissioner Richard mentioned BART, exactly in the same position. So in any event, I appreciate the work that has gone into this, the questions that are being raised and that are being answered, and I for one feel that we're at a turning point, and that it's a good turning point for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Harden, do you have another comment? Let me just add a few of my own here. Mr. Ramey and I discussed, along with Mr. Van Ark, adding examples not just from the United States but from around the world with respect to how these major infrastructure projects were built. While this is a visionary project and unique to the United States, it's really the only high-speed rail project, true high-speed rail project in the United States. There have been other countries that have successfully built and operated projects, and I think we're going to incorporate those, at least I hope we do, in the business plan. We have an extensive outreach program that I'll ask Mr. Van Ark if, in our binders, if you could add the information as to the town hall meetings and the other opportunities for community involvement each month, because I think the board members will be both amazed and impressed with the number of different opportunities that exist around the state, not just the Central Valley, but all around the state, for the community to voice their views. So if that could be done, Mr. Van Ark, I would be grateful.
We'll do that.
We are a bit challenged right now as we are looking for, an RFP has been issued for the external communications firm, so staff is a bit overwhelmed, and I don't want this to be a tremendous burden, but if that could be added, that would be great. All right. Moving on then to members' reports. That's a segue to my report. We've had the opportunity to visit extensively with the governor and his staff over the last month, and we're quite pleased. The governor has demonstrated strong leadership and support for the project, as is evidenced by the recent appointment of 2 new board members who he's had great confidence in a long-term association that will bolster, I think, our status and will also demonstrate to the community at large the governor and this administration's commitment to this visionary project. Secondly, concerning staff, we have probably fewer on staff today than we did 3 months ago, and it's come to my attention and realization in the last month or so since I've been chair as to, I knew they were hardworking, but I'm absolutely astounded at the kind of effort and energy staff's put in, not the least of which is Mr. Van Ark, into this project. Emails, 11 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning. It's amazing how much so few have done for this project over the last year or so. So having said that, let me turn it over to other members and other reports. Ms. Schenk.
Yes, just to add that you, as you know, and Mr. Van Ark and I went to the editorial board meeting of the San Diego Union Tribune and had, for the first time, the opportunity to speak about the project, and it got quite good coverage in last Sunday's paper, and I would commend that to a lot of commissioners if you have the time, particularly in your local spheres of influence, to meet with the editorial boards, whether on or off the record. I do want to bring up, if it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman, at the last meeting that we had in Sacramento, I had asked council to please provide us with what steps might be taken by Phase 2 projects to step into the shoes of perhaps failed Phase 1 sectors, so that we can begin, for example, if we get to the point where along the peninsula we just cannot make headway, that we can begin to redirect funds to places such as the San Diego-Los Angeles corridor, which is, as we all know, the second busiest Amtrak corridor in the nation, and has the proven ridership and has the more welcoming attitude towards this. So I was just wondering, Mr. Van Ark, if perhaps council might be ready to answer that, and if so, I'd like to hear it, please.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Amy
Amy.
Wynn from the Attorney General's office. I would point everyone to the Bond Act and to Section 2704.04B3 of the Streets and Highways Code. I think, and again, I need to preface this by saying that I am not speaking for the Attorney General herself. I'm giving you the legal opinion based on my best estimate of it. But that provides, and I think the section says that upon a finding by the authority that expenditure of bond proceeds for capital costs in quarters other than Phase 1 would advance construction of the system as a whole, you have to meet all the criteria that's required for Phase 1. You have to meet the design requirements. You have to have the funding. You have to have, et cetera. But I think your scenario where you talk about if, for instance, litigation or something else prevents you from going forward with Phase 1, and you have the money and the ability to go forward with non-Phase 1 sections, that would seem to me not to be inconsistent with this provision. So my answer is if you, as long as you are not affecting, the critical part is if you're not affecting the development of Phase 1 for whatever reason, then you may proceed outside of Phase 1.
So in other words, the Phase 2 sectors, the Sacramento, Merced, San Diego, Los Angeles, they can begin to prepare to see if they could step into the shoes of a Phase 1 segment that might jeopardize the advancement of the project. They can do that, certainly. What do we need to do to make appropriate findings to allow that to happen?
Well, I don't know that at this point we can commit funding to determine whether, or use bond proceeds to determine whether we can go outside of Phase 1 at this point. I think that would be premature. However, I think we're concentrating on the initial construction section, and it's some way down the road for us to look at going outside Phase 1. I'm not sure I'm answering.
Well, Amy, what if these segments are using their own money to get themselves prepared? All right, so we're not using bond proceeds or, in any way in violation of Prop 1A. What do we, as an authority, need to do? What kind of findings do we need to make to say, okay, this section of Phase 1 is not going to go forward because of litigation, holds of various kinds, legislative action of various kinds. So we now declare this portion of Phase 1 not moving forward, and we will substitute X part of Phase 2, whether it's Sacramento, Merced, or San Diego, Los Angeles. What are the steps that we have to take?
Well, I think there's really only one step. I mean, you have to do all the research and the work and finding everything out, which, again, couldn't be supported with bond funds, or probably could not be supported with bond funds. But then you have to satisfy this provision that I just cited, which is that you have to show that, one, you have the money and the resources and the environmental studies to meet all the requirements to go forward with building any piece of construction of the project. And then, two, which I think is the critical one, you have to show that it will not affect the construction of Phase 1. But I think you do that in one step. The board decides that. The question is that before that, you're going to have to gather all the information and have the studies.
So the first step is not finding that the particular segment of Phase 1 it will jeopardize the moving forward of the project. I mean, can we make a finding, for example, just hypothetically, that what is going on in the peninsula is keeping the project from moving forward in a timely fashion, and therefore we're just going to say, okay, we will stop on the peninsula and look elsewhere.
I think you have to meet all these requirements. So it doesn't really matter if you do, you have to meet all of them at the time that you are going to commit any bond funds to outside Phase 1.
Okay. Well, I don't want to belabor it. I'd like to see a copy of all of that, if I may, if I can get it from you. I'd like to take a look at it and, sort of begin to see where we need to go on that.
Okay. I'll try to do that for you. Thank you.
I think Dan has one.
Whoops. Mr. Richard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, Counsel.
Amy.
I'm sorry. Just a very quick follow-on to Ms. Sheng's question. As I understand the import of her question, and I understand your answer, then fundamentally, would you tell me if this is correct, that if this board determines that for whatever reason, litigation, lack of consensus, lack of other local support issues, that a segment of the project is not likely to be constructed during the foreseeable future of some period of time, then it would seem to me it would follow logically that moving on to a Phase 2 section would not be deemed to, by action of this board, interfere with the construction of the Phase 1 segment, because we would say that there were existing exogenous reasons why that construction was not going forward. So that would seem to provide the kind of flexibility that the Vice Chair is talking about. Does that sound reasonable to you?
That does, Mr. Richard. I would point out that before you're actually going to commit funds, you'll have to meet all the other requirements too. But yes.
I understood that any Phase 2 thing would have to meet all of the same criteria for funding even the initial segments. So that's a given, and you were clear on that. But I think Ms. Shank was really trying to understand our flexibility in the case that some segment stalls, to not let the whole project stall, but to move forward with other pieces.
And I think that is the reasonable intent of the Bond Act, yes.
Thank you.
A couple things. One, my comments with respect to staff also apply to our support from the AG's office. You've all been very, very supportive with timely and excellent advice. Secondly is that what I'm interested in is flexibility. And so to the extent that you need to develop whatever it is, an opinion, maybe even a formal opinion, as to how we can achieve flexibility to be able to move funds, for example, from a Phase 1 area to a Phase 2 area, that would be most helpful to us, at least to me. And I think that's consistent with Ms. Shank's suggestion.
I think we can discuss this further. There are certain requirements for a formal opinion from the AG's office, and certain people can request them, and we'll certainly look into that. And speaking of the AG's office, I do want to recognize our CEQA counsel, who's Danae Aitchison, who's sitting over there in the green sweater.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair, sorry.
Yes.
I'd like to follow up on that, if I can. I'd have to say that, well, I always feel uncomfortable putting an attorney on the spot to give a verbal opinion on something that's
but it's kind of fun.
Complex. It's great fun. What I've found in other forums is I can often lead the attorney to verbally indicate an opinion in the direction that I would like, even though it's not fully thought out yet. And I think that's unfair to the attorney. And frankly, I think if the board were to be requested to make decisions that have to do with reallocation of money, that we should have a clear letter from the AG's office that defines how we do that with beyond the verbal presentation today. Some of what was mentioned today, I was thinking, well, gee, does that apply to the Central Valley? You know, can we shift funds away from there based upon what was discussed here? And it didn't, I don't think that's what anybody's intent is, but I want to be careful about how we define these things. And when we talk about litigation, I don't want to be encouraging people to file litigation thinking that that'll, cause the board to not make decisions that it should make to move forward in certain areas.
Right. Your point's well taken. While we're not afraid of litigation, we don't want to create additional opportunities. So to the extent that we need to be able to take the right steps to be able to have some flexibility, or perhaps that the AG's office can demonstrate to us as how we can, within the parameters of the law, including Proposition 1A, be able to have flexibility as to where we devote resources, that would be most useful. And I am mindful of the fact that there are only specified entities and individuals that can request opinions, and we'll look into that to make sure that we find that specified entity or individual. So thank you.
So can I have to sit down?
You can sit down.
Okay,
yes, thanks. All right. Thank you very much. All right. I don't believe there are other members' reports. Now we'll turn to the CEO's report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the public, my report today is a little longer, but I think we have a little time, so it's not too bad. Firstly, you've taken away some of my points in any case, but I'll touch on them again. Staffing at the authority, You're right, although the staffing search continues, we have not yet been very successful, and we don't have many successes to report. On the other hand, we've had a lot of interest in people applying for the senior positions, as well as other state positions within the authority. The process, I believe, is just starting to accelerate now. So we're looking at the Chief Program Manager, Chief Financial Officer, Regional Directors for the Central Valley and Bay Area, Chief Counsel, Chief of External Affairs, and Risk Management. So once again, there are a lot of people that have applied. It's a matter of now going through the process, the elimination, and finally making the right choices. On the communications and outreach, the RFP for communication and outreach has gone out, and the bids are due in 14 days. We hope to have a new contract in place before the end of September. The value mentioned in the bid is for $1.1 million. It's for the balance of this year, so this is on a fiscal year basis. We assume approximately 8 months and left in this year, and we assume that the contract will start officially November the 1st. The full year cost is thereby the equivalent of about $1.7 million. The contract term will be on a multi-year or annual contract basis with a expiration date of June the 30th, 2014. You've heard about the great deal of outreach that's taken place on the business plan, and I must say the business plan team, I participate in a lot of them as well, but the business plan team is out more or less every day speaking to stakeholders, legislators, and informing people, and also gathering information so that we can get their wishes incorporated in the business plan. We had some people here from Kings County before, and there's also been a lot of discussion as to how we can help people understand these thousands of pages of EIR, EIS documentation. So to help all these, in particular smaller organizations and individuals, obviously, we have also set up a Kings County project office. This was open to provide more accessible venue for Central Valley residents who wish to learn more about these draft reports and for us to guide them to find things. Our outreach staff and technical staff man this office and help people in the San Joaquin Valley as a whole to understand the documents better. This seems to have been well received, and we're very happy about it. The meetings have also been continuing. You heard about the meetings this whole week. We've had a lot of meetings already. These are separate from that office where we are talking to people in the Valley on the EIR document and helping them to understand the document better. Also, as part, obviously, of outreach and communication, the important message the Chair has already referred to by our Governor Jerry Brown during his visit to Fresno is obviously a strong confirmation of his support for the high-speed rail project. His appointment of members Dan Richard and Michael Rossi to the Board of the Authority is clearly another indication of his interest to put strong people, onto our board to make sure that the board and the authority makes the right decisions as we move forward. The next point I'd like to talk about is the issue of the Grapevine investigation. I would like to remind everybody that the Grapevine is potentially one of various alignments that would be considered to connect Bakersfield to the LA Basin. And we have never said that the Grapevine would be chosen through this process, this very short process, to be the alignment, the only alignment, but that the alignments that go through Palmdale would also be retained in the EIR process. So several broad corridors have been identified through this Grapevine area that potentially meet our engineering criteria and offer what it looks like a substantial capital cost savings. Further engineering is required to identify an actual alignment and to determine whether there are any fatal flaws. The study is anticipated to be completed by our next board meeting, at which time decision would then be made whether to take this Grapevine alternative in as an alternative to the other existing routes that are already in the EIR. We continue to meet with primary stakeholders. We had meetings also with the City of Santa Clarita and Tejon Ranch The City of Santa Clarita has also indicated general interest in the idea of the alignment and also the possibility of a station within their city. The team is also working with Teo and Ranch to identify whether these alignments that we're looking at are acceptable and, of course, are minimally impactful. More detailed engineering will continue on this. At the same time, however, good progress has also been made on the costs of the Bakersfield to Palmdale section, as we have started looking, with the help of all the stakeholders there, to reduce some of the tunnels and viaducts and to ensure that we get maybe an enhanced and somewhat reduced cost solution there. Continued studies have also taken place between Palmdale and Sylmar, in other words, the other leg towards the San Fernando Valley, to further refine the alignment and potentially identify other issues with lesser impacts to the rural communities in the Acton and Agua Dulce area. For the past 2 years, the team has been working on a number of modifications to minimize impact to these communities. And at this point, the two known alignments, generally that were in the EIR up to now, seem to be still the main two alignments through the Antelope Valley that will be retained. We'd like to confirm to all parties that all the environmental impacts and economic aspects will be considered when we finally come to the board and make a recommendation as to whether the Grapevine alternative gets taken up as an alternate in this particular environmental study. Staff anticipates, as I said before, this to happen most likely by the next board meeting. The draft EIR-EIS launch for the Merced-Fresno and Fresno-Bakersfield sections. These documents were launched on the authority's webpage on August the 9th, 2011, and the official 40-day public comment period started on August the 15th. So we were able to launch it some days earlier on our own webpage, making it available to the people because we understand the need for them to have access to these documents as long as possible. During the past 10 days, the authority received a number of requests for extension of the public comment period. In parallel, we have established that a disk submitted for the Merced to Fresno section only through the state clearinghouse, and which was passed on to the state agencies, was found to have some corrupted files on receipt of the disks of the ROMs. In light of both these requests, that means people asking for extension, and also the fact that some data was missing and corrupted on some of the disks, the authority has decided to extend the public comment period for both the Merced to Fresno as well as the Fresno-Bakersfield sections to October the 13th, thereby, in fact, extending the comment period from the official kind of 45 days to 60 days. We hope that this extended period will go a far way to meeting the needs of those who've requested an extension, but at the same time will ensure that we as an authority and project office can stay on schedule and meet the dates that we need to meet. As I said, the information meetings in the Valley are continuing, and in mid-September we will then be doing the official public hearing meetings in the Valley. So what we are having at the moment are just information meetings. The public meetings are set up in a very different way, and again, the same thing applies to this particular meeting. If people made verbal comments in this particular meeting, those comments are not used as part of the EIR-EIS process. You should please submit written comments to the authority to respond to. When you get to the public hearings that are scheduled in the Central Valley and various locations during September, we will put transcribers there, and they will be able to take down your messages and put them to record at the time. The status of the RFQ, and here I talk about the RFQ for the construction of the, what we refer to as ICS, initial construction section in the Central Valley. We have completed the internal coordination of the RFQ documentation, and this is currently in a draft form at the FRA for their approval. Details of this RFQ will be announced at the 8th of September outreach meeting in Fresno, and the RFQ document should, somewhat dependent obviously on the clearing now of the FRA, should be submitted within the next few weeks. I'd like to give some feedback on the costs reported on the Merced to Fresno and Fresno-Bakersfield EIR-EIS. There was quite a lot of press coverage on the project cost as reported in these draft EIR-EIS reports. I can confirm that the cost levels as included in the documentation were the same cost levels that we reported to the board in the December the 20th and the March 30th, December the 20th, 2010 and March 30th, 2011 board meetings, when staff presented our approach and strategy for the recommendations for applying for funds to the FRA. Clearly the costs are higher than those that were previously estimated and included in earlier versions of the business plan in 2009 and in the previous versions of the environmental documentation. So again, this has been broadly discussed in the press, and we have also put information on our webpage regarding this. The main reason for these increases are that the previous costs, the original costs in 2009 and before that, were based on a 5%. Morning. The previous costs were based on 5% design levels, where today we are at those design levels that normally engineers use for doing these cost estimates. So we, as you know, for the EIR-EIS are at a 15% design level, and even to some extent to a 30% design level as we have gone beyond the EIR-EIS process. So we are obviously a lot more accurate. The details are available as to exactly how, what, and where we will be building. Mitigation efforts for both environmental and community reasons have also increased the costs. This is as a result of people requesting more mitigation, both environmental and community impacts, and the authority obviously aiming to meet the local requirements. Additional aerial, so this is further cost, and you will see wherever you look at these costs, there is a lower cost and a higher cost alternative. You also know that there are still alternatives in the Central Valley in many areas, and therefore one ends up with having a higher cost and a lower cost alternative. So in particular in the higher cost alternatives, there's additional aerial structures, but there are also in the lower cost alternatives, increase in earthwork and retaining walls for raising the high-speed rail alignment in the floodplain areas of the valley. We've also had to include more retaining walls and sound barriers to address technical and environmental issues, and these were some of the bigger cost drivers. Furthermore, individual unit costs have also increased since 2009, 2008, when the previous ones were valid, and the length and the level of contingencies on our costing have been set to where the FRA and the authority feel that they should be at this stage of the project. As we are preparing for the launch of the business plan, and you heard about the business plan earlier on, we can confirm that for similar reasons, you will find, again, high-level and low-level cost levels, because as we move further out of the Central Valley, we retain the alternatives in the Central Valley, and as we move further out, there are many more alternatives that we are investigating on the alignments number 3 to 7 of Phase 1. Furthermore, you will also see similar, for similar reasons I've mentioned before, cost increases on those sections of the alignment, including, because the Central Valley does not have tunneling, increased need for tunneling, and here I refer to the presentation that I made to the board in May 2011, where we referred to the Antelope Valley alignment, where there were increased lengths of tunneling and viaducts through the Tehachapi's, which have caused and resulted in additional costs. And that's not the only place, but that is one example that we discussed in this forum in May. And of course, in the area of the Bay Area, we have, for instance, a 4-track viaduct as one option and even trench options, rather than what was in previous business plans, 2-track viaducts. And therefore, once again, these issues have resulted in increase in costs on the project. These costs will be included in the business plan, which we have discussed earlier on and will be rolling out soon. The alignment studies are continuing, and opportunities do exist to reduce aerial structures, and we're looking at those, and of course tunnel costs as well. We will obviously, as the program continues, continue to look at cost reduction exercises. One thing I would like to explain to you, though, is that standard industry cost estimating methodologies relies on a bottoms-up estimating procedure and current and historic cost data. As such, it does not necessarily account for other factors which could reduce overall costs for the California High-Speed Rail project, including alternative delivery methods, especially known in design-build contracts, where we allow design-build contractors to look at how they can enhance economies of scale or change their work processes to get better efficiencies out of the way that they actually build these systems. And, of course, the construction market conditions. One does not, when you do an engineering estimate for a project of this nature, take the present-day economic climate into account. Clearly, as we move into the first rounds of these bids, we are hopeful that due to the economic climate, there will be a great deal of competitiveness on the bids as we receive them in a very low economy today or later on or early next year. In the area of litigation, we will have a session afterwards briefly, but just wanted to give an update. On August the 12th, there was the final hearing in the Atherton CAHSRA case, and from that day onward, a ruling will be required within 90 days, so we await the ruling within 90 days from August the 12th. August the 29th, 2011, was a hearing to determine whether Palmdale litigation, where they're challenging whether the grapevine study may proceed or not. So that hearing will be on the 29th of August. The September the 8th Industry Forum, you have heard about it already. The Industry Forum has been sent, or the invitation has been sent to thousands and thousands of interested parties, and I want to reassure the board, the numbers are huge. There's many, many small businesses in the state. We go through all the the address indexes that we've got and the associations have got to invite the people to these forums, and we have had a great response. It's our second high-speed rail forum. The event will be held in Fresno and will focus on the procurement process for the next year's initial construction segment. And the program management team will give a project overview, as will I give some discussion and progress reports, as well as the latest information on how the bid packages will be shaped, the RFQ process. Small and disabled businesses will again have the opportunity to network with prospective prime contractors. And we have set up a facility where such prime contractors will host booths after the session so as to interact with small businesses. To date, we have nearly a dozen of these prime contractors that have already signed up to host these booths. And the information that will be presented at the forum, the list of attendees, and so the videos and everything that we will be presenting will also be put on our webpage so as to give access to many more people, and not just those, especially those that cannot travel all the way there, but they will have access to the webpage and to the information as well. One or two comments on the blended system on the peninsula. So you may well have seen in some press coverage too that the interim outcomes of the Caltrain capacity study have been made available. It is, I repeat, it is an interim outcome at this stage, and Caltrain is very clear. They also refer clearly to it as an interim outcome. It's become clear that to get a reasonable number of high-speed rail trains up the peninsula would require most probably in the region of 8 mile of double track or 4-track. Double track in this case means doubling the track, which is 4-track. Infrastructure, most likely between Redwood City and Hayward Park. High-speed rail is looking at the analysis, and we will meet with Caltrain. We've had some discussions with them. This is not the first discussion, obviously, but we will meet with the Caltrain management as well in the beginning of September to discuss the way forward. A request for clarification is being sent to the AG's office to address the possible legal issues. You know that Prop 1A and CEQA issues need to be ensured that we do not make mistakes here. Caltrain has had some outreach meetings in San Mateo County, Rail Corridor Partnership, Spur, Caltrain Board. So they've had quite a few meetings out there. And also the Bay Area Council, and you know that many of you know a well-respected organization representing about 300 major corporations in the Bay Area, has become actively involved in high-speed rail and has always been actually a supporter of high-speed rail. And through a letter they wrote to the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, they have requested the MTC to become actively engaged in these deliberations with Caltrains, ourselves, and San Jose, San Francisco stakeholders and elected officials, the purpose being to assist all of us together to develop a solution on the peninsula that will bring high-speed rail to San Francisco. So we have a draft conflict of interest policy, another topic. The authority has put this draft conflict of interest policy out to the public some while ago. The authority extended the public comment period to accommodate additional feedback, and in fact there was a conference call with interested parties yesterday on this conflict of interest policy, and the comment period has been extended until August the 26th, and so whoever still wants to make comment there too, please do so. The authority intends to publish the policy in a final form on Friday, September the 2nd. We hope that this policy will reduce uncertainty in the business community about whether they are conflicted out of some of the work that we will be contracting out for. And obviously we'll want to encourage competition and all business participation, but people need to understand whether they are in a conflicted situation or not. And I think this will be a good document at the end of the day. On agricultural working group, I had mentioned before to you that we have set this up, agricultural working group in the Valley, and the ag group is now established. It has met twice. In fact, they meet again today, and that's why one of our very few colleagues is not here today, because he has to run that particular meeting. And they've begun examining issues raised by the agricultural community together with the community so that we can further analyze them and also incorporate a lot of the aspects of their requirements, for instance, into design, into more detailed design requirements as we move forward. A visit by the DOT and FRA during the period of July the 19th to July the 21st, a Department of Transportation, Federal Department of Transportation delegation led by the Undersecretary Roy Kienitz visited Southern California, and we had many discussions arranged down there, some unrelated to high-speed rail, but many of them obviously related to high-speed rail as well. Clearly the DOT, FRA are interested to find the right solutions for California to ensure that this project continues and stays on track, and also to support possible funding opportunities in Southern California. A word on the ridership peer review panel. You know that I have implemented a ridership peer review panel constituted of 5 experts from around the world that I have got the responsibility to overview the work being done by our consultants and on ridership modeling, and also to investigate criticism that has been directed at us on certain aspects of the ridership modeling. The work is continuing well. We met with a peer review, or they had meetings, a peer review meeting on August the 10th and 11th, and hopefully we will shortly be able to view their report. They have been, unfortunately, it's often the case with new bodies and new groups. The first reports took a longer while to get out, but we did publish their first reports. We have really requested them to accelerate the process to get reports out faster, and we hope that we'll be able to get the next report out quite soon. I can just say in advance that many of the concerns that have been raised in the past by many organizations and individuals have been answered by updating information and providing explanatory information and model runs and discussions by our modelers and by these experts. So I remain optimistic that we're moving in the right direction and that we will resolve this issue in the near future. On my last point, just a matter of information, our PMT, Parsons Brinckerhoff, has an advisory committee. They've had this for at least the time that I've been on board. They put one together just after I arrived, where they look after their own interests. But it is good. They have senior management that look after and interface with the working team, with General Van Winkle and his staff and his management team. And they have added one person to the advisory committee, K.H. Lee. I don't know if many of you know K.H. Lee. He is well known, actually, because he was the CEO of the Taiwan High-Speed Rail over a period of 10 years, so during the period of building Taiwan High-Speed Rail. So I can only say, another valuable resource to have as an advisor on their team, because once you've been involved, and we also have staff, basically, that built that Taiwan High-Speed Rail, not on our staff, unfortunately, but on the PMT staff. It's good to have an advisor like this, K.H. Lee, on that panel as well, because we have access to his knowledge and his experience as well. So with that, that is my review for today, and I'm open for any questions.
Any questions? There being no questions, I'm sorry. Commissioner Schenk.
Thank you. Roloff, on the staffing, which is a bigger issue for you than anybody else in the room, what are some of the holdups? Do you have the authorization? Is it what we can offer in the way of compensation? I mean, is there something that any one of us up here can help?
I think the answer is all the above, but I guess that where we are today, we are in a position that we most probably are better than we've ever been before. That means I am very hopeful that we have now broken the ice. We are just before appointing some of these people, so that means we've gone through all the difficulties, and we should be able to appoint some of these people quite soon. So, it has been a difficult, 14 months, but I don't blame 14 months on, we had a change of administration here too and things like that during the time. But in fact, the legislation is in place, everything is actually in place, we have budget, we have everything. I think we are there now to make it happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Oops. Thank you, Mr. Van Ark. Let me just clarify a point that our able and hardworking press secretary made with respect to a comment by me in the Huffington Post. I do think $6 billion is a lot of money, by the way, and that, just to clarify things, over the course of the project, there'll be some variance, and $6 billion over the course of the project is within the realm of what that variance might be. But just to make sure that there's no ambiguity, $6 billion is a lot of money. All right. I think that's it. So we are now adjourned. Before everyone departs, right now our preliminary date for the next meeting is October the 3rd. Is that correct? Okay. Ms. Nguyen?
Oh, Chairman, I just would note that there was a closed session meeting on the agenda, But we should probably point out that that has, there's determined that there's not a need for that. So, thank you.
Good point. All right. With that, we stand adjourned.